Perfect. Hello, everyone. Welcome. I can see some of the participants joining us tonight. I really appreciate your participation here in our UHS college planning webinar. I'll wait as people pouring in, I'll wait to get started here in a minute as everyone starts to join. Again, I really appreciate the community and their involvement in this participation for our webinars. We've been doing these webinars for a few years now and changing up the topics, changing up some of our presenters to try to keep up to date and keep things fresh as far as the information that comes in, in the college planning process. But again, a big part of this is really the community's participation and helping to make these things valuable for the information standpoint, and also our college admissions reps that come in and really help us facilitate these webinars as we do them year in and year out. So as I mentioned, as some participants are joining, we have more and more people coming into the webinar. I'll introduce myself to start off here. My name is Bob Fendora. I'm one of the school counselors at Unionville High School. I've been facilitating these webinars for a few years now. Like I said, we get a lot of participation, a lot of views on these. They are recorded. And so, we post these typically on the Counseling Center website. Usually about 3 or 4 days after the recording, we'll get it up and running under the college planning section. One of the biggest parts of these college webinars that we participate in and we do throughout the years is first and foremost our participation from the college admission reps. Their participation is absolutely positively crucial. And the big part about it is that, when we go through these different webinars, is the topics might change and the information might change. But the reality of it is that they're the ones that really help facilitate this on top of the community, and it wouldn't really be possible without them. Tonight we have 3 different topics that we're going to cover. Tonight we're going to start off with the components of the college planning process, the application process itself, and we're going to move into the second part will be the highly selective college admissions portion of things, and then lastly making the most of the college visits. And as we go through, we have 3 different college admissions reps for each topic. Typically what we do is the admissions rep will present for about 10, 15, maybe 20 minutes, depending upon the information they're sharing. As they're presenting on a topic, at the bottom of your screen, you can see there's an option for you to enter questions into the chat. As you enter questions into the chat, after their presentation, I'll be able to ask them their questions if they haven't already been answered during their presentation. And there'll be a nice rapport back and forth and making sure we're getting your questions answered. So throughout the entire recording, again, feel free to ask questions as we go along in the chat, and we'll be able to get to those. The 3 presenters we have for tonight, we're very fortunate, starting off with Jim Van Blunk. I'll introduce him in a minute. Jim's from Temple, and he's going to be presenting on the components of the college application process. We also have Carrie Burton from Penn State. She'll be going last with making the most of the college visit. And then there in the middle, we're going to have Fletcher Weichel. He's going to be presenting on the highly selective from the University of Pennsylvania. As each of these presenters go, you'll notice that as they start to present, they're going to talk a lot about the topics. I just ask that as everybody starts to ask questions, just be patient. If you see your question disappear, most likely it's probably because as they presented, they were able to answer your question. So again, typically the presentation will run from about 6:30 to 8, and we kind of go along as the different presenters go through their presentation. So first and foremost, I'll get things started here with Jim. Jim, I know you've joined us here on and off through the years in different topics, and I'm always trying to get your expertise and your background so strong in college admissions. I just want to say thank you first and foremost for coming tonight and presenting for us. So I really appreciate it, and feel free to jump in here, Jim.
Sure. Thanks so much. Thanks always for thinking of me. I always like to do these. Unionville is one of my favorite places. I'm a Chester County resident. My daughters ran the cross-country chess match at Unionville when they were in school. So it's really, really awesome to be here with such a great group of counselors and a great community. So, and also a thank you, as you already did, Bob, to the participants. It doesn't work without having folks, sign in and register for it and come and listen to what we have to say. So super excited to be here, super excited to share some information. Just start with a brief intro so you kind of get a sense of who I am. So I'm Jim Van Blunk, as was already mentioned. I'm a Senior Associate Director at Temple. This is my 16th year at Temple, but I began my admissions career and spent about 20 years at my alma mater, which was St. Joe's. And in the middle, I did a little bit of work, about 3 years as director at Villanova. So have a good perspective on some smaller private schools, some middle range schools, and now at a large public research one institution like Temple. They've all been great experiences, and I love working in the admissions field. In addition, I had the great pleasure of going through this process as a parent with my twin daughters a few years back. And
Sure.
you think you know a lot, and then you go through the process. So parents, I can answer some questions from that. And then finally, I also got the pleasure of being able to coach while I was at St. Joe's for a little bit. So have that NCAA background, which is always great.
Perfect.
So I wanted to talk a little bit tonight about the process, just really briefly, because I think it's really important to get the Q&A and answer your specific questions. So just to start off with, this will be a journey. It will be a journey that you take together, hopefully as a family. When I started the journey with my daughters, I had really long brown hair, and now I look like this. So parents, though, it's totally doable. You will live through it. If you've been through it before with an older child, I would just ask to remember that, everybody's different. Even your own children. My twin daughters were different in things that they were important to them. So I think step one of the process is for students to really, take a step back and do a self-assessment. What do you like to do? What things do you enjoy? Where are you academically? What kind of things are you looking for in a college? What kind of environment, are you thinking about? I was a management major, and I was told to always start with the end in mind. And here the end is to find a school that's a great fit for you. And remember, it's a great fit for you, not for your brother, your sister, and not for your significant other, and not for your parents. Sorry, parents. And not for your aunt or uncle. I know we all just lived through the holiday season, and I'm sure we had some family dinners, and I'm sure the topic of college search came up, and everybody had an opinion, and that's awesome. But I would just beg of you, when you have questions, come to the experts. You have such an amazing group at Unionville to be able to work with you through this process. And we're happy on the college side to answer any questions that you might have, because, we're the ones who are in it every day. So we know the school backward and forward. So let's talk a little bit about fit. I think there's a couple of different things that you should be thinking about when you're talking about fit for a school for you. The first would be academic. Again, the self-assessment of where you are academically, what school looks like a school that, from the information that you can glean, would be a good fit for you academically. You kind of fall into that, middle 50% range with your GPA. If there are test scores, required, that you're in that range. And do they have the programs that you want? My daughters picked a program at Temple that we don't have. 165 majors, and they chose one that we don't have. So all those years of working at Temple, thinking I'm getting free tuition, out the window, right? So I'm not bitter, though. Don't worry, it's good, right? But that's part of it. Like what are you interested in studying? And as an 18-year-old, it's okay not to know what you want to do, but at the same time, there's got to be an array of things. So in your research, you want to think about that academic fit.
Yeah, Jim, and if I can chime in, I don't want
Yeah,
to
no,
break up
absolutely.
your
Love it.
presentation here, but I
No,
can't
no.
stress to you enough, Jim, how often I have students coming in absolutely positively sure, here's what I want to do, here's what I want to be, here's the school I'm going to, here's what the rest of my life pretty much looks like at the age of 16, 17 years old. And Jim, I think it was, and it's been a while since that last conference I went to when they had the discussion, but the reality of it is, I think it was upwards of almost 60% of kids changed their majors their first year. And I think a big thing that I stress, and if you can touch on this just a little bit, even with your advisors at the college or what it looks like, I think at this point in the year 2024 now, I think colleges understand that students aren't necessarily going to know exactly what they want to do right away. If that's the case and it works out for students, and you're one of those percentages on the other side, that's fantastic, and it can match up with a lot of your goals. But I think a lot of times that's why so many of the majors do have these general education classes when you come in, and
Mhm.
that a lot of the students are taking similar courses until they mature a little bit and start figuring out what they want. So that point that you just brought up, I think, is really crucial. Can you kind of just touch on that? And again, I don't
Yeah.
want to break up your presentation,
No,
but it's
no,
just
no, no. It's
so
great.
important what you said.
Absolutely. And I think it's totally okay to not know what you want to do. Schools will be different in how they handle that, but in most cases, coming in undeclared is perfectly okay. And in fact, I mean, just to use Temple as an example, we don't, it sounds bad when I say this, but when we review applications, we don't even look at your major because we know, as was mentioned,
Yeah.
the likelihood of you changing that major it can be pretty high. Um, the average number of times a student changes their major in college is three. And you might come in thinking you want to be a chemical engineer, and my daughter did the same thing. She switched out of chemical engineering after 2 weeks, and she stayed in engineering, but it was a different field. So I think it's super important that you go through the process and understand that it's okay to be undeclared. It's okay to apply undeclared and start there. In our advising process, being undeclared probably will get you the best advisors that we have because they know so much more about all of our curriculum than other faculty members might. And no offense to the faculty members like in the business school or in the art school or in anything else, but they know their curriculum. The people that deal with the students who are completely undeclared, they know our entire curriculum and can really help you start that process. You won't fall behind. You'll be fine for graduation. Like all those things are still there. But again, it's totally okay. You don't have to freak out or stress out because you're undeclared. In a lot of cases, you could be undeclared in a particular school or college. So, for example, you could be undeclared in the College of Business at Temple. You could be undeclared in engineering because you might know you want engineering, but do you want mechanical? Do you want electrical? Do you want, chemical? I mean, again, it all depends. So please don't freak out about that, and talk to your admissions counselors. One of the ways that you can really personalize this process is to get to know the admissions counselors that visit Unionville, because more than likely they're going to be the ones that work with you in your application process. So it's really, really important to get to know who they are and reach out to them, which
Yeah.
is which is great.
Yeah,
You
so
know,
Jim, on that point, it's funny you bring that up. I was just speaking with a parent today about this. Again, to your to what you brought up earlier, Jim. By no means do I want you speaking on behalf of every single college university across the country, but I
okay,
will say this: there are different approaches, and a lot of times colleges, universities are very upfront on their admissions website because they want the questions answered. They don't want 500 parents contacting them through email and asking the same exact question. These websites are very, very informative to parents out there about exactly what the expectations are for the different colleges because it can look very different, from a
right,
Penn State, all the way down to maybe a smaller school like a Muhlenberg that's a little more rural. It could look very different. But I will say, to your point about reaching out to the college admissions reps, yes, some of the larger schools, they might not have quite as much access when they're getting 30, 40, 50,000 applicants or something from that standpoint. But you'll know right on the admissions website that the reality of it is you'll have access to them, whether it be something as personal as potentially interviews that your child can do with that admissions rep, all the way down to what Jim's saying, that even if it's just emails here and there to be able to respond, a lot of them you will have access to, and a lot of them you'll be able to contact. At the very least, typically, and Jim, I'll ask you about what your time frame is for this, but at the very least, the admissions rep tend to come in to our school, and a lot of times it's in person, and they're going to meet with our students. So, Jim, if you don't mind speaking to that a little bit about when you make your rounds to the different high schools.
yeah. I mean, I'm responsible for Chester County. It's great because I live there, so everything's fairly close by. But I mean, we try to get out. I try to get out before our early action deadline of November 1st. So I want to visit as many schools as I can in that late September, October range because I want to get out there and talk to you about about the school, but also about the process. And I want to make sure you have my card, because you absolutely can reach out to,
Yeah.
to the reps that visit your school.
Yeah.
They're visiting your school because they have a relationship with Unionville, and you want to get a relationship with them. In fact, at a big school like Temple, it's hard to personalize the process, but this is one way to do that. You know who your admissions rep is, and I'm sorry, for better or worse, you're stuck with me. But but I'm happy. I answer all emails. We do a thing called Once Hub where you can sign up and schedule 20-minute appointments with us either by phone or by Zoom, one-on-one. I had 3 of them today.
Yeah.
We're happy to do it
Perfect.
because we want you to get the right information. And
Yeah.
we as colleges, we want you to find the right fit. I don't want you to try to, I'm never gonna try to talk you into Temple if
Yeah.
you tell me that you're not a city person,
Yeah.
right? Like
Yep.
it just doesn't make sense. So we all want the same. We want you to find the school that's the right fit for you,
And,
and we're going to
and,
help you with that.
And Jim, just to chime in, just so parents know, because you're on the subject and we just got done kind of talking about that point, just so parents know in the community, if you go on our UHS Counseling Center website, right on under the college planning, we actually have a schedule on there where the college admissions reps work with our administrative assistants, and the time and the location and exactly when they're coming into our school, the date, it'll be in there on that calendar, and it's on our counseling center website. So it's not something that's secretive or we're hiding or anything from that standpoint. It's right there. It's located. It's there. And we even at times post on our billboard outside of our counseling center a hard copy of who's coming in and what times and what dates outside of our counseling center too. So the information's there, parents. I just want to let you know that, because I know a lot of times I have questions about who's coming in and when. It's right there on that calendar on the counseling center website. So yeah, Jim, again, sorry for kind of chiming in here, but it's such a big
No, it's
point I
good.
want to kind of get across. So thank you. I appreciate that.
No, absolutely, absolutely. So continuing with that fit and things you should search for, we mentioned it briefly, but geographic, do you find yourself really enjoying being in a city, or do you find yourself, not so much a city person? And that can dictate it. Size. Do you find yourself attracted to a large research one public university like a Temple or a Penn State or a Pitt? Or do you find yourself looking at a smaller, more private rural school? Those are the kinds of things. And the greatest thing about this area, you guys, is that there's so many different schools that fit lots of different criteria like that, all within like a 2-hour radius. So you don't have to go all the way across the country to see a big school in a city. You can come to Temple and visit and get a feel for that. Or you can go to Penn State and get a feel for what that's like, or a University of Pennsylvania, those things. And they're all right here, and then you can expand from there. And then socially, what do you like to do? What things can you absolutely have to continue to do in college that you do in high school? Is it a musical instrument? Is it being in an ensemble? Is it performing? Are you in the play? And do you want to continue to do that? And if so, do I have to be a theater major or things like that? So those are kinds of things that you want to talk about. Do you want to continue playing a sport in college, but maybe not at the Division I level? Then maybe a lower level would be better for you, a little less intense, or maybe a club sport. My daughter, of all things, found the triathlon club at her school, and she loves it. And she was a pretty good runner in high school, but she said, "I don't want to." She goes, "Dad, I'm an engineering major. I got enough stress. I don't need the stress of being a Division I athlete on top of that." So that was fine. Her twin sister, full bore ahead, walked on to a Division I team because that's absolutely what she wanted. So those things are important to you. And so many schools offer the things that you want to. And then finally, and this is a conversation I think that eventually parents need to have with their kids, and how specific you get is completely up to you, but that's the financial fit. And I will say, coming from a public school whose tuition is usually pretty reasonable, do not rule out a school because of that initial sticker price, right? It may end up that you can better afford a school that's tuition is $60,000 than a school like Temple, and it all depends on the aid and the scholarship and those kinds of things. So I remember we came back from visiting an Ivy League school that the kids really wanted to visit, and they loved it. And we came home that night, and I said to my wife, "What are we going to do if they get in? Like, how is this going to work?" And so we had that conversation of, look, we didn't go into specifics. We didn't say this is how much we make. But we said, like, it's not unlimited, right? Like, we got to think about this. We got to think about that piece of it. And so even if it's a brief conversation about that, it's important. It's important to have. Just some other kind of tips.
Yep.
You got to be organized, guys, girls. You got to be organized. Like deadlines may be extended for you at Unionville. We don't. Colleges don't do that. If you miss a deadline, you missed a deadline for that program. And so it's super important to be organized. My kids did a big spreadsheet, and they had the schools they were thinking about applying to, and they had the application deadline, and they had requirements, like what kind of things did they need? Did they need to do testing? Did they not? Those kind of things, just to keep them kind of on track. And then parents, this is hard, really, really hard. but let it be the beginning of the letting go process. You have to do your best to let your kids lead this process. And I know some of you are rolling your eyes going, do you know my knucklehead kid? He'll never get into college if I let him lead it. Well, you got to try, right? You got to at least let him, like, for example, something small, but colleges notice. You go to your first, we went to our first, my daughters, we went to our first college visit. We were on our way to the Outer Banks for vacation and decided to take a couple extra days. So we visited a school. They walked in to the lobby, and they walked up to the desk and registered. And my wife and I sat in the background. And too many times I see parents walk in and they walk up and they register and they do everything for the students. We notice that, right? We want your student to take the lead and be the one that checks themselves in, that maybe helps you make the presentation, make the appointment, those kinds of things. So do your best to kind of let them drive the bus here a little bit. Try not to take over. I will tell you one thing that really worked for us, because these kids are getting bombarded with stressful questions about where you going to school, where are you going to apply, from all different angles, right? And they just need a break. So what they don't need is to come home every day and have you guys as parents ask them 1,000 questions about the process. What worked really well for us, we picked a day and a time, and that's when we talked about college applications. So for us, it was Sunday night after dinner, had a nice dinner together, and then we talked maybe for 20 minutes about where they were in the process. And it was really, really helpful. It kept us informed, it kept them on their toes, and it just really, really worked. So I would absolutely kind of recommend doing something like that.
Yeah.
Okay. Application review, just really quickly, because I know we want to get to Q&A. There's the academic side of the evaluation, right? So we're going to look at the strength of your curriculum at Unionville. You have a lot of choices, which is terrific. We want to see that you challenge yourself in an appropriate way with regard to that curriculum. So what kind of classes did you take? And then, of course, how well did you do? Academically, what do you look like, right? How did you do in those? Testing, is it a test optional school that you're applying to, which so many are now, or is it not? If it's not, then what happens if I do send them, or I want to send them?
Yeah, Jim, real quick. I'm sorry to interrupt, but just
go.
as you mentioned that, just to kind of keep it very basic for some of our parents here, we typically invite parents that even down to ninth grade that are first time in this process
Yeah.
of ninth graders and 10th graders even. If you don't mind, we have a whole dedicated topic of
Yeah.
test optional
Got it.
optional testing and what it means,
Okay.
but just the basics of what that means for our parents, as you just mentioned it, for the college application process.
Yeah, so for many schools now, they have gone to a test optional policy, which means the students can decide whether or not they want to send their test scores or they don't. But they're not required. So we'll review an application whether you send us your test scores or you don't.
And that's for the SAT and the ACT.
That's the SAT
Yep.
and the ACT. And to the point now where in the last 3 years, only 25% of our applicant pool has sent in their test scores. So 75% do not. So we'll evaluate the application without it, which every school has their reasons why they do or they don't. But that's something that's out there now and has been out for a few years now. The essay, I would say, it is important because it gives you another opportunity to personalize the process. Personally, I like to read the essay first before I go and start talking and reading the other pieces of the application, because I'm hoping it's going to give me a little bit of an insight into who you are. I would just ask a few things. Please don't make it a 10-page essay. If it's 10 pages, then I'm sorry, we cease to be friends. I don't like you anymore. You'll be a sophomore at Penn State or Penn, and I'll still be reading your application from Temple. So no 10-page essays, okay? That's the big thing. Try not to write about why you want to go to a school unless they specifically ask you to, because God forbid I have to read an essay about why you want to go to Penn State, because then I just got to come to Unionville and find you and do bad stuff to you. I can't do that. So don't do that. We're really interested in using the essay to learn more about you. And some schools will have specific kind of topics they want you to cover. And by all means, answer the questions. Extracurricular activities are always interesting and good for us to see. But just remember that you do things outside of Unionville. So don't just list those things that you do, any clubs that you're involved in Unionville. You might be really involved in your church youth group. You might work. You might have to go home and babysit a younger sibling. All those things count. So don't forget about those things. And then letters of recommendation are always helpful to us. However, I would ask that you use the same discretion as with the essay. I don't need 10, and makes me nervous that there's something I missed. And that's
Yeah.
why 10 people are vouching for you rather than just three,
Well,
right?
Jim,
So
Jim, on that subject, we get this question so often now, with the letters of recommendation. I'm happy you brought that up because it just the question I get constantly, and our counselors get constantly at Unionville. And again, this is one of those tricky ones because it could be very college, university specific, but just in your experiences, I get the question of, well, Mr. Fendora, if they're not listing what they want for a specific amount of recommendations or particular types of recommendations. Hey, I have my elective business or art, or my business teacher, or I have my elective teacher that I had for class. Should I get that letter of recommendation from them, or should I get it from my English teacher or one of my core teachers? Does that carry more weight, and what does that look like? And I also get, Jim, hey, my boss at the grocery store has known me really well here for 4 years now. Should I be sending my boss's letter of recommendation in as opposed to my math teacher's letter of recommendation? And again, Jim, I know I'm kind of walking a fine line here because some schools are very specific about that. But just in general, if you can
yeah,
kind of speak to letters of
yeah,
recommendation with that.
yeah. I mean, I think that different sources are really helpful.
Yeah.
So if that boss knows you in a different way, that's really great to know. That's really great to hear. That's really great to see. They can
Yeah.
touch upon things that maybe your math or English teacher doesn't
Yeah.
see every day. So that's a really a good letter to get.
Yeah.
I think with regard to teachers, if there's two things sort of that I would recommend. One, if it's a teacher in a subject area where you intend to major, that's really helpful to us, right? Because you're thinking about majoring in that area. Say it's a business thing, or say it's English. You thinking about writing, being a creative writer major, a creative writing major. Then maybe an English teacher would be really really helpful. If it's a course that's challenging, I think that's helpful as well. If it's an AP course or an honors course, I think it's a letter from that because it speaks to the level that you have grown.
Yeah. Yeah. Jim, I got to be honest, you really kind of answered a lot of our questions here already. If you can, just the last thing before I move on to Fletcher here, we have
Yeah, yeah.
Fletcher from the University of Pennsylvania. It's going to speak to a highly selective part of that process. But Jim, before I let you off the hook here, and I know this could be specific to certain admissions people, and it's different for school to school, as we always mention. But anything about, let's say we didn't find that right fit, and some of our community members' children are going to be possibly transferring into Temple or applying as a transfer student, or Jim, maybe even exiting out of Temple, which I know doesn't happen very often at all. But if that's the case, can you speak to just a transfer student's application? What are they looking for? What does that look like? And again, like I said, it's rare that it happens, but we do get those questions in the counseling center. Any advice you can give on that?
Yeah, no, I think it's okay. There's a lot of people that change their mind and transfer schools. The transfer application is a lot more streamlined, and we're looking specifically at your collegiate work. So with regard to acceptability, we want to see your final high school transcript because we may not have seen that.
Hmm.
But we're really going to focus on, how you did it in that collegiate environment. And that so it's much more streamlined.
Perfect, perfect.
Yeah.
Well, Jim, as always, I have to be honest here, just in case I did not always give you credit where credit's due. I've been using that idea for years now, since one of our first conversations, probably half a decade ago now. That idea is just so helpful when I give it to parents about setting aside that specific time with your child
Yeah.
to talk about the admissions process, because you absolutely nailed it. A lot of our juniors, our seniors, they're having conversations at lunch with their friends, and that's all their friends are
That's it.
talking about. They go to their friend's house. The first thing out of their parents' question is, "Where are you going? Did that so and so school get back to you?" They're at a family function, somebody's birthday party for their cousin. First question in everybody's mouth: Where are you applying? What's the process? Where did you get in? The fatigue that our students start to feel this time of year over all of that
Mhm.
is absolutely overwhelming. So the last thing they want to do, unfortunately, is have to feel it at home. So setting aside that time is just it's just such good advice, and I still pour that on. And then really two other things, Jimmy, you brought up that we see a lot, that's important for parents to understand that you brought up is really that idea of a lot of parents are probably going to laugh when they hear me say this at home, but think about how different each of your children might be. The process itself can be very different. As Carrie's kind of mentioning here, there's schools that will, for instance, Drexel, I feel at this point, well, it feels like they'll take 20 different letters of recommendation in their application process. And as Carrie's mentioned, everybody from Penn State here, she'll be on a little bit later. Carrie's mentioned at Penn State, for a typical application outside the honors college, they're not reviewing letters of recommendation with the number of applicants they get. So it could be very different. Whether your child is going to go to, like you said, to a city, or they're going to go to a rural school, from child to child, it could be so different. So for parents being involved in these webinars and parents being involved in this process, don't think just because your oldest came through that it's going to be smooth sailing moving forward. It could look very different for each kid. And then that last part that you brought up, it's a really unique situation, Jim, of making sure that communication, the parent is involved. You want to
Mhm.
have the child steering the ship,
Of
but at the
course.
same time, and I see this time and time again, and I'm very biased with our community and our students here at Unionville, I feel like they're very mature, very independent kids. I can't begin to tell you the amount of times I have parents say to me, I haven't checked my child's grade since they were in sixth or seventh grade because they handle things so well themselves and they are
Yeah,
so independent. Well, here now you're getting into this major process where major decisions are being made and major amount of money is being involved. All of a sudden, parents, you have to be involved in that process also.
absolutely.
But again, you don't want to take over that process too. So it's a fine line, as Jim mentioned. So Jim, again, just some great points by you. I appreciate you chiming in. I appreciate your
Yeah,
participation with us, and I,
sure.
and I really I really appreciate how helpful you've been. We're actually going to kind of move into things here with Fletcher from University of Pennsylvania. Fletcher, if you don't mind, I would like for you to just give a little bit of background about yourself here to the Unionville community here, and then we can kind of jump into things, and I'll start firing some questions at you sooner or later throughout your presentation. So take it over, Fletcher. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Bob. Hello, everybody. My name is Fletcher Weichel. I am an admissions officer at the University of Pennsylvania. I oversee Greater Pennsylvania, which is pretty much everything that isn't Philadelphia or Philadelphia suburbs. Technically, my wonderful colleague Ana Del Puerto has the territory where Unionville is, but she has been kind enough to allow me to meet with all of you tonight, which I'm really, really thrilled about. So I've been working at Penn since actually August, so I'm relatively new to the office. But before then, I was a fellow at Penn, and I attended a highly selective liberal arts college in New England, and then began working in admissions there throughout my 4 years. So highly selective admissions is something with all of its pressures and stressors and the variety of ways that it works is something that feels very familiar to me. So I was incredibly thrilled to find out that that is what I was going to be asked to speak about tonight.
Thank you.
Um, yeah, of course. So if I can give like a quick overview of some cursory thoughts, and then, Bob, if at any point you want to throw in any questions,
Perfect.
please feel free.
Yeah, please. Thank you.
Um, yeah, of course. I know that there is a lot of fascination and curiosity surrounding highly selective admissions. It is sort of this great mystery in the college world. The good thing is that Jim, thank you, Jim, for such wonderful words, really did hit on so many of the things that usually I would speak about. Wherever you are looking for college, whatever the acceptance rate is of the school, the most important thing is going to be your child and if they will be happy and if they will be a fit. Especially when you are looking at highly selective admissions, which I did Google this before I started talking, tends to be anything with below a third of a percent. So this is going to be about anything with a 33% acceptance rate or lower. Penn's acceptance rate tends to hover between 6 and 7%. I think this year we're about to go down to 5. But that is totally fine. Those are scary numbers. And so if you are just looking at the most prestigious schools and the most selective schools, that is fine. We often do that because we have this idea about what college should be and what it should look like. And the parents that are on this call are going to really understand and know the idea that we want your child to have the best. You are probably looking at schools like Penn and other similarly highly selective institutions because you believe in your child and what they have to offer. And to you, of course, as a parent, and to me, when I've talked to people that I'm very close to that are younger than me and are looking at college, I'm like, oh my gosh, like you're incredible. Please apply to like this, and this school. Because like you love your kid. And that is simply the straight and narrow of it. However, the thing about highly selective admissions is that they are no great determinant of just how exceptional your child is. Very few highly selective schools, whether you're looking at Penn, other Ivy League institutions, other highly selective institutions in what we'll call the Ivy Plus circle, or even smaller liberal arts colleges, right? And there are some certainly highly selective liberal arts colleges in Pennsylvania, let alone the rest of the country. You are going to be looking at schools that all have a very different feel. So again, going back to Jim's feeling about fit, I visited highly selective schools when I was in high school, where I immediately walked on campus and said, "This is not the fit for me." I'll go on the tour, I'll have a good time, but this is not it. So again, reiterating the idea of like you really do need to trust your child through this. If they are exceptional, every single one of your kids is absolutely incredible. They are going to end up at a space that is just the right fit for them. It is far more important that your child is at a place where they will be happy and they are supported than if they have the number one name in the country, right? I love working at the University of Pennsylvania. I am incredibly, incredibly proud to have had a portion of my education there. It's a really wonderful place, right? But I also will acknowledge that it is not the right place for anyone, just as any school is not the right place for anyone. It is very easy in our current system to get lost in the prestige of a name. And I am imploring all of you as parents to trust your child. Again, reiterating what Jim said, but also saying trust your child in the fact that they will be exceptional regardless of their context. Because if you start looking at those numbers and what it means to be a highly selective institution, you will drive yourself crazy and also probably your kid along the way. And it is kind of a numbers game and a game of chance. And that is not meant to frighten you. It is rather meant to reassure you that everything that you think about your child and their capabilities is completely right. So, with that being said, with those, I would like to think very necessary disclaimers being said, no school handles highly selective admissions exactly the same. Penn, for instance, when you look at the school, you are going to, be potentially joining an undergraduate body of about 10,000 students. You're going to be looking at four distinct undergraduate schools, one of which is the College of Arts and Sciences, the Wharton School of Business, the School of Nursing, and the School of Engineering and Applied Science. Each of those schools has different things that they are looking for. Each of those schools has slightly different things that we would prefer for admission. All of them have very similar acceptance rates. However, if you look at other highly selective schools, whether you are looking at universities, which basically means anything that doesn't define itself as a liberal arts college, because, let's be honest, we've all probably been on US News and World or Fiskars or any college board or any of the other wonderful platforms where we find these informations. There will be liberal arts colleges and then there will be universities. The things that I'm going to say and kind of the questions that I'm going to answer are hopefully going to apply whether you are looking at liberal arts schools or universities, because I went to a liberal arts school. I really loved it. And while I'm here as a representative of the University of Pennsylvania, I do actually think that if you're looking at highly selective schools, the wisdom is the same, regardless of what exactly type of school you're looking at, right? So when you're looking at highly selective schools, they're all going to be structured differently. They're all going to have a slightly different vibe. Even if you looked at all of the Ivy League schools, to use that sort of highly prized moniker of prestige, right? If you're looking at those 8 schools, they are not all the same. The one thing that unites the Ivy League, and in fact, a lot of highly selective schools, is going to be the way that they identify. So the Ivy League, all that really refers to is the athletic conference in which they would compete. Think of it like if you're looking at a Big Ten school, right? That's like where we get the name Ivy League. And also the idea that a lot of highly selective schools are going to have this commitment to need-based financial aid. So if, especially for those of you that are parents of freshmen and sophomores, that means that there isn't going to be any merit scholarships, which can feel like a very frightening thing to say. And I am not going to at all defend the way that financial aid works in this country, and in these systems, because I know it can
Well,
be incredibly stressful.
and Fletcher, if you don't mind me
Yeah,
asking, just because again, we have a few
yeah,
of the parents here that are new to
please.
the process, and you know, even some of the students, parents that are
Mhm.
that are students in ninth grade. Can you kind of share just briefly here the basics of what merit-based scholarship is for our community?
You really read my mind, Bob, because that is exactly what I was gonna get into.
Perfect. Thank
So
you
a
so
lot of
much.
schools will talk about need-based versus merit-based financial aid. So merit-based financial aid means that you have hit a certain threshold of generally academic achievement, whether that is GPA, test scores, and usually increasingly more and more, sort of extracurricular involvement, etc. A great example is kind of the way that national merit works, right? Where if you perform a certain way on the PSAT, right, you are a front runner for certain merit-based scholarships. Need-based aid means that we are getting the number that you are planning to contribute or are able to contribute, which is a much more accurate phrase to use, to a college education, whether that number is zero, whether that number is half of tuition or more, whatever that might be, right? And we are crunching numbers, which really just means we're doing addition and subtraction and saying, here is what we need in order to make this school feasible. The wonderful thing about highly selective universities, for better or worse, is that they tend to have pretty generous endowments, which means that we are going to do the most possible to make sure that your student can afford the school just through straight grant-based financial aid. Which grant-based means that it is the equivalent of a scholarship in the fact that you do not have to pay it back. Penn and other similarly selective schools will never package loans. I highly recommend if you are starting the process, or even if you are well into the process and you're curious about how on earth does financial aid work, because it really is an area that could use a lot more clarity, looking to see if the word grant appears anywhere on a school's financial aid website. If it is a grant, I want you to take that in your head and think, okay, that means scholarship, because we are a lot more familiar with the term scholarship than we are with the term grant. So if you need half of Penn's tuition in order to afford it, and I will not lie, the tuition cost for schools like Penn and other private, highly selective universities is very high. However, at Penn, about 75% of students receive financial aid, and the average financial aid package is well over two-thirds of the cost of tuition, assorted fees, etc. Um, that is the thing, is that these are institutions that historically enjoy a lot of privilege, and so they are able to give you that money at the front end, um, which can be an advantage. But again, the big thing that I want you to take away from all of the jargon that I am throwing around, and please feel free to call me out on it, Bob, or anyone else in the Q&A if you're like, what does that mean?
Yeah.
Is that when you apply to a school like Penn, you are not going to be waiting to see if you qualify for the President's Scholarship in order to make your tuition package. You're going to be able to trust the fact that at the front end, Penn is going to say, okay, you need X amount of money. We are just going to provide that for you, regardless of qualification. So that is the way that financial aid is currently working. This is something that is constantly evolving, but for all of you, regardless of if you are the parents of a freshman or a senior that applied to Penn, like it is all going to be the same, right? Is that all? Bob, do you think there's
No, yeah,
anything that
that's
I should
perfect.
add
And
there?
Fletcher, the reason I just chimed in there was you described it
Mhm.
perfectly. You kind of went through some of the basics, which is exactly what I was looking for. We actually, just so
Good.
families know, we're going to take a much deeper dive into financial aid at one of our webinars. I think the one in actually in March. We're gonna dive into that. I have a representative coming in that's from the financial aid department from one of the local colleges and universities. So yeah, Fletch, I was just looking at you as you mentioned it. You really did a good job covering it and how it relates to
Good.
Penn and some of the highly selective schools. That was perfect. I was just trying to get some of the basic info for
Yeah,
that. So thank you for covering that. Yeah, no problem.
absolutely. Great. I'm so glad to hear that.
Yeah.
And in addition, just like a lot of people tend to see highly selective institutions as a monolith, as if you can take the same application and apply it to Penn or the University of Chicago, UC Berkeley, NYU, whatever, insert sort of highly selective
Hmm.
institution here. They are all going to be different. They are also going to be different in the way that they view different rounds of admission. So that's something I also really want to touch on. Um, because I firmly believe if you are looking at applying, especially early decision anywhere, and so I joined this a little late, so I apologize if this was already touched on. But early decision is this binding agreement that your child can make with a university. Not all schools offer it. Some schools offer 2 rounds of early decision. This is typically smaller, highly selective liberal arts colleges where you're going to apply. You can have early decision 1 or early decision 2. These are again really binding agreements. These differ, I believe Temple does early decision as or early action, as does Penn State. Early action is a different thing. It just means that you get your decision early. You do not have to respond until May 1st, which is the typical deadline for, giving your notice to schools. Early decision means, okay, I'm going to apply on November 15th. I'm going to hear back on December 15th. And if it is a yes, I'm in. I am locked in. This is going to be the school that I am attending, right? And so I know it is challenging, especially as parents that really want the best for your child, to say, okay, what is the school with the lowest acceptance rate? Should I apply? You need to apply the early decision, actually, because early decision tends to have a slightly higher admit rate than regular decision does. Most schools will fill about half of their class in the early decision round and then the other half through regular decision. And there are certainly plenty more applicants in regular decision. So if, but I really want to discourage that because here's the thing is that if you are picking the school with the lowest acceptance rate on, your child's college list and really encouraging them to apply early, that might not be the school where your kid is the happiest. It might not be the school that matches their needs, matches their wants. Um, if your child is thinking, okay, I really want like a liberal arts style curriculum, I don't quite know what I want to study. Please do not make them apply to the Wharton School of the University of Pennsylvania early decision. I am begging. They will be much, much happier looking at a liberal arts school that will really allow them to explore that kind of opportunity,
Yeah,
or even the college at the University of
yeah,
Pennsylvania.
Fletcher, I'm really happy you brought that up because I don't see it often, but I'll tell you what, I do see it in that especially some of our students that are applying to strictly highly selective schools, which is always a little concerning because of the acceptance rates. But
Yes.
I find the conversations I have with the students while they're in their junior year, leading into their senior year for the applications, when we start talking about that early decision that you just brought up and that binding commitment with early decision that you can only do to one school and make that commitment to one school for an early decision option. When I find I'm asking them questions about what can you list me a few names of schools you're thinking about
Mhm.
applying to, or can you tell me the top 3 or 4 schools that you're looking to apply to just based off of interest, nothing else alone? And all of a sudden they start naming some of these schools, but then after it's all over and said and done, they say, oh, but this is the school I'm applying early decision. And they didn't even necessarily list it at the top of the list of schools that they're
Yeah.
doing. They're applying early decision to that school simply because of how, in their mind and what they believe is the most prestigious school,
Yeah.
the most selective school. And they're applying there as the early decision commitment. And sometimes I think with families, that's where it gets dangerous, where a student just applies early decision thinking they're going to have a more of a capable road of getting into that school, but they don't
Mhm.
understand once you're getting in, that's really locking you into that one school that you apply to. So
Yes.
I'm happy you brought that up, and that's a great topic. Thank you.
Yes, of course. Because there are very few parts in the process where I or Bob or any other person that your child has ever worked for with college admissions will say, please trust your ego about your child. But this is one part where I will say that and say, please trust the ego and esteem in which you hold your kid and their capabilities. Because if they are telling you that this is the right school for them and this is the spot that they are interested in, and even if it isn't Penn or an Ivy League or a school with a 5% acceptance rate, trust them. Seriously. I am seeing in the Q&A, there's a question here about kind of how we assess the idea of fit. How much of a fit is about a student's gut instinct, how much can be categorized as something much more objective. And when we are talking about fit, it really is about trusting that gut instinct. Think about it, the very common metaphor is of kind of the cafeteria, and there are all of these different tables, right? This is sort of an early aughts teen movie stereotype, but I think it really is true, where you have people that, are maybe in the environmental club here, people that are in the drama club there, right? if your child is looking at schools, they're trying to find the table that they want to sit at. If they are at a school where they are unhappy, they are not going to be taking advantage of the resources that the school has to offer them. They're not going to be really stretching themselves. They might feel like they can't take the classes that they want. Um, and so again, I've been asked here tonight to talk about highly selective admissions, but the biggest thing that I have to say about highly selective admissions is that the only thing that is different about them versus admission at any other school is that the acceptance rate is lower. It does not guarantee that your child is going to be happy. It does not guarantee that your child is going to suddenly become the next Mark Zuckerberg or, insert famous billionaire here,
Sure.
right? It does say that your child might get the chance to become a member of a very small and very prestigious community. But again, it does not mean that they will be happy. It also does not necessarily mean that they will be more successful. And so I really want you to, yeah, please, Bob.
Yeah, so yeah, Fletch, I appreciate that. So I've had some questions coming in. Then I also have
Yeah.
I also had some questions that I know just from parents asking year in and year out. Really two here, Fletcher, before we move on to Carrie from Penn State here,
Mhm.
talking about the college visits. And again, parents in the community, thank you. I know we have some questions coming in now. Feel free to use that question at the bottom, the Q&A or chat at the bottom there to ask some of your questions, so we can answer them as we go along. I appreciate the participation. Fletcher, two pieces here. I guess the first question I'll ask you, anything you can just give some background information or even describe what it is. And I don't want you speaking on behalf of all highly selective schools, but we a lot of times we get questions about what exactly is a supplemental essay. I'm finding
It's
that
a
with highly
great
selective
question.
schools, it's a little bit different. Anything you can share
Mhm.
about a supplemental essay for our community members out there?
Absolutely. So the supplemental essay, first of all, we do actually read it. I feel like that's a very common misconception is like we receive such a high volume of applications for such a few spots, and so we can't actually read everything. But we do. I can tell you as we are in the midst of reading season, we read absolutely everything, oftentimes 2 or 3 times. But regardless, the supplemental essay is a chance for you to articulate whatever it is that the school is asking. For Penn supplements, there are a couple, one of which is a gratitude question. You will find this most commonly in highly selective schools or especially liberal arts colleges where there is a question that is a lot less, "Why do you want to come to this school?" and a little bit more like, "Tell us about a time that you laughed out loud. Tell us about a movie that you would like to direct and also star in." And those really are a chance for your child to show their personality and what they are interested in. We are looking there for like that sort of spark that you get when you meet someone really incredible. We are not looking for the most highly sophisticated essay. We want that enthusiasm, we want that joy in our community. There will also be supplements that will ask, why do you want to apply to this school or that school, whether it is a school within a university, like the School of Nursing at Penn, whether that is, why do you think that Bucknell will be an excellent fit for you, whatever that might be.
Mhm.
And I really do what they're asking there is not just why do you wanna come here? Because in all honesty, having been there in your student's shoes, that might be the packaging was really great, and, my friend went there and loved it, and, like, that's totally a fine reason to look at a school.
Yep.
But it is asking, how do you envision your future self growing and thriving here? So in any supplement, I think it's really important to think about, like, who are you going to be in the future? You have done so many incredible things in the past, and I encourage you to really, really, like, magnify that however you can in your essay. You might have overcome things as well, and those are just as important to mention. There will always be a section in the additional common or in the additional information section of the common or coalition application asking, is there anything else you would like to tell us? Please use that if you think there is anything else, whether that is a health issue of yourself or of your student or of a family member or any other sort of disturbance. If they got bullied, I think that's something that people are starting to talk about more, which I'm really happy to see. If there was X, Y, and Z, right? But
Sure.
when we're really looking at the supplements, we want to see who you're going to be in our community.
Got it.
How are
Got
you
it.
going to
Yeah.
contribute to this space in the future?
Nice. Yeah, Fletcher, that's very helpful. Thank you. And I guess just
Mhm.
the last question, and before we move on to Carrie here, last
Absolutely.
question for you. And again, I know this could look different for each of the schools, but anything that your experiences on anything your experiences on interviewing, interviews, if schools hold
Mhm.
them, so on and so forth. What does that even come close to
Absolutely.
looking like? Anything you can cover on that before we kind of move on?
Mhm. For sure. And so keeping an eye on them, on the time for Carrie, I'm happy to talk about this because different schools, shocker, value interviewing differently. So for Penn, it has moved away to something that is called an alumni conversation where you talk with an alum. It is quote unquote non-evaluative, which means that we see a record of what you talked about, but we're not actively like seeing a rubric that your interviewer filled out that said like professionalism 5 and like interest in pen 7, or anything like that. We're not using it to evaluate your application. However, some schools will actually put a significant amount of value on that interview, especially liberal arts schools. But more and more schools are also doing interviews over Zoom or via phone with the goal that like we do not want the only people that are able to interview to be the people that can visit campus because like things happen. Not everybody can take a college like trip, not that they should ever have been able to, if that makes sense. But you know, we really are looking at interviews as an extra part. If you are not granted an interview for a school, or if you can't, you know, have an interview for a school, please do not worry. It is always nice for the school to get to know you a little bit more. However, it is never, ever going to be make or break, even if you go to the smallest, most selective liberal arts college that you can think of. It is never going to be make or break if you have interviewed or not. It is always going to be an extra piece. It is always going to be a chance for your student to get to showcase who they are, not just who you think that we want to see as highly selective institutions, but who they actually are. I will tell you, as someone that reviews a lot of applications, if a student is giving us an essay or an interview or whatever it might be that is not authentic to them, but rather they are trying to, you know, make it just right for Penn or whatever school they are looking at,
Mhm.
you can tell. And a little bit, your heart breaks for the student because you know that they have such incredible and dynamic thoughts to offer that they feel like for whatever reason we are not going to appreciate. The face of higher education is constantly evolving, and the people that are working at these schools are really, really invested in your student. Even if you think that we are too busy or too overloaded or too pretentious, whatever that might be, to really care about what your student has to offer, every person that I have talked to, and I mean this very, very genuinely, who works in highly selective admissions is there because they care about the voices that are represented and the students that they get to work with and give this opportunity to. That does not mean that this opportunity is the be all end all. If your child is not admitted to a highly selective school, it simply means that the numbers were not in their favor. The vast majority of the applicants that I read are exceptionally qualified for Penn, and that is the same at any school that you look at. It just means it didn't happen, and that's totally okay. It is
Yeah.
not an indicator of your student. It does mean that they are incredibly clever to have even begun this process and to continue going on it. I know you have excellent staff at Unionville that are helping your students to build the best possible, you know, list for them. Listen to them and know that if your student is admitted to a highly selective institution, that's great. If they are not, it does not mean that they will not be tremendously successful and happy. And if they are applying, let them lead with actually who they are,
Yeah.
not just the version that you think is best to present, because trust me, those are the essays that stick with you. Those are the conversations that stick with you as well.
No, it's great. It's great, Fletcher. Yeah. Now, Fletcher, I have to apologize. I did get one question sneak in here, and Care, if you don't mind being a little bit patient.
Yeah.
This last one was good. You touched on it a little bit. A question came from
Mhm.
from the community here. How does financial aid work with early decision? Do you want to avoid
Mhm.
early decision for a school you might not be able to afford without additional aid? A very tricky question. I know it's
Yeah.
very personal to family to from family to family. So I know it's a very specific, very specific question that might not relate to some families in particular, but just any advice you might be able to give for a question like that, and then we'll move on to Carrie. Thank you,
Yeah.
Fletcher.
Absolutely. Financial aid is something that I feel really passionate about because it was through sort of grant-based financial aid that I was able to afford college, and it was something that I sort of never thought would be an option, right? And so, like having been where you guys are, looking at early decision, looking at financial aid, if a school is promising to meet, 100% of demonstrated need, which is the fancy admissions jargon for saying we're just going to do some addition and subtraction and see what you need in order to make X, Y, and Z school affordable for you, they are not holding out on you when it comes to early decision. They're not thinking, okay, we need to save 75% of our budget for, regular decision. We all can only use 25% for early, even though we're admitting 50% of our class, right? Like we are really, if your student is applying early decision, especially to a highly selective school that they are passionate about, the financial aid will work out. And the thing about most financial aid offices is that they are actually willing to work with you because financial aid is not a science, right? Like there are parts of your family's financial history and background, as I know there were parts of mine, that need further explanation. And so, that first estimate might not be right. And again, like people know that. So if for whatever reason you apply early decision and that final number isn't exactly what you need because I don't know, tax documents are strange, and even as a 24-year-old, I'm still baffled. Please do not freak out. Talk to the schools. They will want to work with you because the thing is that they want your child to come there. They care deeply about them. They care about that demonstrated interest as well that comes from applying early decision. So there is, generally speaking, going to be no difference in financial aid. If there is a difference in financial aid, the school will articulate that.
Yeah.
It is in their best interest at all times to be as transparent as possible, whether you're looking at highly selective schools or not. Again, that transparency is becoming an increasingly common thing.
Perfect. But hey, Fletcher, thank you very much for your participation here tonight. Just wonderful job. I appreciate the clarity. I appreciate you, being very specific about certain parts of the process. I know highly selective can look very different from school to school, but the reality is I think we're able to cover a lot of the basics, and I really appreciate your help tonight. So thank you.
Of course.
No
Thank you
problem.
guys
All
so
right.
much.
Awesome. So everyone, I'd like to move on to Carrie. I appreciate your patience here tonight. I'd like to move on, Carrie. So we get a ton of applicants, as you're well aware of, Carrie, to Penn State each year from from Unionville High School. So I appreciate your participation tonight. Carrie, if you don't mind, we're going to be talking about college visits, what it looks like, some of the basics. Unique to Penn State a little bit. If you don't mind, I'll also have a little bit more Penn State specific questions, just because we get so many applications. So some easy questions I'll fire at you that we get all the time in the counseling department. But if you don't mind, just as Fletcher was able to do, and Jim, if you could just start off with a little bit of your background for everybody, and then kind of jump into anything you have to say in regards to college visits and what it could look like, and some advice you might have for some of our community members.
Absolutely. Yeah. Awesome. Thanks for having me. So even as the webinar has been going on for like the past hour, I've actually been editing a slideshow, been throwing some stuff in as I've been thinking of it. And the very first slide that I have, as I ever so casually bring it up here for
Perfect.
you
Thank you
folks,
very much.
is going to be, hopefully what you can see
Yep.
is, who am I and why am I here? So I am Carrie Burton. I am Assistant Director of Admissions at Penn State University. I am coming up in a week on my 11th year at Penn State. So super exciting stuff. I absolutely love what I do. I am an alum of Penn State. I studied, if you can't tell already, visual journalism and English. Look at me using my degrees all day, every day. But I have been actually based out of the Penn State Brandywine campus for the past 11 years. Because as I mentioned in the chat, if you saw my chat comment, I'm a Delco girl. I went to Upper Darby. So after studying at University Park campus and earning my degrees there in State College in center of PA, wanted to come back home to Philly area and do my Penn State thing, but here in Delco. So I wanted to make sure that I kind of framed it as, who am I and why am I here?
Perfect.
Because I want to show you who actually your admissions rep is. And as I think it was Jim that was mentioning earlier, he was saying, make sure you connect with your admissions rep and your specific person.
Yep.
I'm not your person. Who am I? Why am I here tonight?
Yeah.
So Alyssa actually had a prior commitment that upon being asked to be in this webinar, she goes, Carrie, no, can you please help me and be at Unionville, virtually, for me, because she was so bummed that she wasn't able to make it tonight. But she is your girl. If any of the students are on the call right now, and you were at the presentation in the fall, you would have heard from her. She's on her, coming in her 3rd year now at Penn State. So she is your person. She is the person that you want to connect with. But I'm actually really glad that I get to chat with you folks tonight and explain a little bit about kind of making the most of the college visit. Because within my role at Penn State as Assistant Director of Admissions, one of my favorite aspects of my job is that I'm actually manager for the tour guides at Penn State Brandywine. So I feel like I do have a little bit of a special insight because I kind of have the behind the scenes, especially from the tour guides perspective, of what they see every day, what they wish they got more or less of from the families and the students that are on tour. So as I said, visual communications is what I studied, visual journalism and visual communications. So I threw a bunch of slides together, mostly to keep myself on track. But I want to make sure that I kind of take it a little bit kind of step by step as you would go through the college visit process, because I'm not obviously going to jump into and suddenly you're on campus, because there's a lot that actually goes into getting ready to go to campus. How do you even register for these types of visits? So the one thing that I kind of want to lead with is checking the registration websites for the schools that you're looking to visit. Because even within Penn State, and you've already heard me mention a few times, I studied at University Park, I work at Penn State Brandywine. Penn State itself has 20 campuses, 20 different locations. And that's just one school, Penn State University. The many schools that you're looking at, they all have their own websites, their own registration protocols and rules and dates and timelines. So I encourage you, especially for a large school like Penn State, especially University Park's campus, to check their registration website pretty often, because you might think, oh, they don't do visits on certain days or times, or I checked the website and I saw there wasn't anything available, or they were booked up for a certain day or time. But then you check back later and maybe someone has canceled and spots reopen, or maybe new dates and times are added, especially based on when the tour guides are available. If a tour guide suddenly has a free afternoon, they may indicate their availability and be able to open some spots for a type of visit. So kind of one of the first things I want to throw out there is check those registration websites and check them often. Don't be afraid to check back, especially if you're not finding the right day and time or type of visit.
No, Carrie, I really do appreciate that, because to be honest with you, I can't begin to tell you how many, and I know we have a bunch here, participants here tonight from our community. I literally get that question from parents. Where do I even start? And I feel like especially not to age myself here, but over the last decade, it's been incredible how streamlined this has become on the website, the admission websites for all of the schools, not just Penn State, making it easy and reliable to be able to get in, log in, and get yourself the time and the date and get the time set up. So I do appreciate you starting with the basics like that. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and even just, I'm sure, especially for the folks that might be watching this on like a phone, this is an incredibly tiny picture that I put in this screenshot here. But this is just to show you an example of just the University Park campus and the amount of visits that they have just for next month. So all those green little boxes that you see, there are visits available on those days. And you may, especially if you're looking on a bigger screen, you might notice there's some gray boxes. Those gray boxes mean that there is a visit on that day, some type of visit available, but it is not available for you to register. It is full. It has met capacity. So the next thing I do want to highlight is that you should not show up if you're not registered for a visit. I'm saying that only because I have seen so many times families just kind of show up saying, we were in the area. Were you really just in the area of State College, Pennsylvania, and you just happened upon campus at the exact same time and moment that the tour guides were about to depart? What a coincidence.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, that tour is full, and it's not because we don't want you and we don't want as many people as possible, but it's especially to respect the tour guides. And they only have either microphones that can project their voices so far, or they only have voices that can project so far. If they're not a school or a university that has the amplification,
Sure. Yeah,
products.
and Kara, I've had a number of admissions reps just tell me over the years. I mean, just simply the logistics of if we're going to go take a peek into some of the dorms or apartments, trying to fit that many people in a hallway, get people in to peek at those things can be difficult. So even just from that standpoint, they try to keep some of the numbers to the appropriate
Absolutely.
size. So yeah,
Yeah, we're always looking for those ratios. We want to make sure that you have a good experience as a student, as a family.
Yep.
But yeah, especially in regards to the tour guide, you having your experience, and then for the campus community to not have, hordes and hordes of people just wandering and traipsing about their campus spaces. So just always a little reminder, don't just show up. I'm going to give an anecdote of 99% of the time you probably won't get on the tour. I made that number up. I don't actually know if that's true.
Sure.
But I'll say maybe at a school that has fewer registrants, or maybe has a really big no-show rate for whatever reason, maybe you might be able to pop on that tour. They might be able to squeeze you in, but
Sure.
let's just not rely on that being the option.
Gotcha.
Another thing I want to highlight is that you should double, maybe even triple check the date and the time for which you've registered for an event. Because we don't want you showing up on the wrong day or the wrong time. We, as the folks who plan these events or plan these tours, plan these campus visits, we try to have them make some type of sense, day to day. We try and have them at similar times so that it's not super confusing to, again, you as the person having the experience, but also like our campus community. They can kind of always expect a tour to go out on a certain time and a certain day, but they do vary. They really do vary. And we want to make sure that the day and the time for which you've registered, because if you show up on a day or time that we don't have a tour or an event, we probably don't have someone available to meet with you. And especially because we want you, again, to have the best experience possible. We want you, especially when taking a campus tour, we want you to tour with a student. If you just show up to campus, hey, maybe I'll take you around if I'm free. But I'm 183 years old compared to our current students who are literally living the experience right now. So definitely want to double check those dates, those times. And you also want to check the type of visit, because I've really been hyping up and mentioning a lot the idea of the tour, the campus tour. But there are different types of visits. And we know that especially, if you are maybe in, 9th or 10th grade, those families, maybe you're just kind of looking to take some tours right now, and that's great. But especially as you get into like 11th and then into 12th grade, there are some specialized visits. Maybe you're meeting with a certain college, the College of Science, the College of Nursing. Maybe you are making sure that you pay attention to the website for the type of event you're registering, because it may only be a virtual event. So just again, the teeny tiny little screenshot that I gave you on the screen, you hopefully can see that I highlighted in yellow. These are a whole bunch of events that are coming up just in the next week at University Park campus, our biggest location. And the little highlighted yellow part there is saying online event. That's one of these many events that we have in the next week, but that one specifically is online only. So if you show up to campus at that day and time, no one's actually taking you around or showing you anything. It is purely an online event, like through a platform like Zoom. So definitely want to double check the type of visit that you're going to be having as well.
Great. Thank you.
I also want to point out that you might hear some fun sounds from behind me, because I have a 3-year-old who's about to head to bed and she hears mommy talking in her office. So if and when she comes in and makes a guest appearance, you'll know why.
Well, usually you're still in my thunder. Usually I end this with our college admission reps to have personal lives, and I appreciate them taking their time out of their busy schedules to do this. So I do appreciate you showing up.
Baby Bree might come in and steal all of our thunder. So we'll just wait to see if that happens. But so don't worry, I only have like 486 more slides. It's all good. So again, we're still talking before your visit. We're not even at your visit yet. But when you register for a visit, Oh, you know what? I didn't even edit this properly. I meant to say register with your full legal name. And when I say your full legal name, I mean the student's full legal
Yep.
name.
Yep.
We mentioned earlier, I think Jim mentioned the idea of the student really taking the lead and the reins here and, you know, introducing themselves when they walk in. That was a steal my thunder because that's something I'm going to make sure I point out in the when you get to campus section. But when you register, when you're doing anything college related, it's always the student's information. Working for Penn State for 11 years now, I can't tell you how many times I've gotten the question on the phone. I realized I entered my social security number instead of my daughter's. I realized that I have, you know, my birth date in there. We didn't think your daughter was born in 1953. You know, we kind of made that connection. We realized it was yours.
Sure.
So we want to make sure that you're using the student's information, but assuming that you're using the student's information, you want to use your full legal name. We understand that this is, you know, you're registering, you're trying to do it really quick, or you might be half asleep on your iPhone as you're doing it. You want to make sure you get it done. But if your name is legally Christopher Mendoza Rodriguez, don't register as Christopher Rodriguez or Chris Rodriguez if that's not your legal name, because we want everything to match up for your future application, financial aid. The more things that are registered under just, ooh, we are sad right now. The more things, close that door there. The more things that match up with just one legal name, with not variations of yourself, the better shape you're going to be in, we promise.
Perfect.
And along the same line, register with an email that you actually check. Register with an email address that is the student's. And I'm going to maybe say something that might be a little controversial, and I don't know how Unionville does it. So I'm sorry if I'm going to contradict something that you advise your students to do, but we actually recommend and prefer when students use a non-school email address for their college stuff. That's registering for visits, applying, checking all of that with the FAFSA and everything like that in the future. Because a school email address will eventually expire. It will usually stop a month or two, maybe after you graduate.
Yeah.
But your
Carrie,
Gmail,
no,
Yahoo,
yeah.
yep, it won't.
No apologies necessary. Yeah, we kind of we'll find our students kind of doing a little bit of both. I mean, the only time we would say to maybe use the school one is if a student's just absolutely certain that they either don't have a personal one and they're going to create it and not check it, or they're simply not checking theirs ever. We do know that our students, fortunately, as diligent as they are checking their school emails because they're through academic purposes, they're doing that. But your point that you brought up is exactly right. I mean, that will eventually expire, and if things happen down the road, it can complicate things. So I completely understand what you're saying, but our students are typically aware of that. So thanks for sharing that.
Perfect. Yeah. And if you're gonna be registering with a personal email address, we maybe recommend not using your cutiebabygirl@hotmail.com email address. Maybe make it a little bit more professional, like your name or the year you're graduating or something like that. It just is only an anecdote of it makes me laugh in my office. So it's totally fine, whatever email address you use, but maybe have a little bit of professional judgment as to the address that you're going to be using.
Sure.
I always want to remind families, students and the families that we want you to contact us if you have any concerns before your tour. So yes, register for the tour, get yourself registered. Usually we have some type of comment box or special accommodations request in the registration itself. But even if there is that box and you put something in there and you still just want to make sure that we saw it, please do not be afraid to reach out to us before a tour. Even if you just want to confirm that you've registered correctly or that you have the right day and time, we want to make sure that you feel comfortable before you even get to campus. And that could include if you need some type of accommodation, ADA, if you need, and you want to make sure that we have elevators and certain types of accessibility, availability on campus, all those types of things, check in with us. Please do not be afraid to do that. We always make sure we have our contact information in the confirmation emails, and we don't just put it there for the sake of doing it. We want you to reach out to us if you have any concerns. All right, those were kind of the little tips and tricks I could think of, the behind the scenes before you register for a tour or before you come for a visit. But let's assume that you have registered and you're ready, and here's the big day, you're arriving for your visit.
Yep.
I encourage families to arrive early. I'm going to call early, maybe like 20 to 30 minutes or so early. That's going to be like ideal, because even that teeny tiny little screenshot map that I put there, it looks like a hot mess, right? It is a hot mess. That's our University Park campus, and incredibly impossible to see right here on this screen. But I highlighted all the different places you could park on campus at University Park, and which is the right place to park to then go to the Shields building to then start a tour. You want to make sure that you arrive with enough time that you can find the right parking lot
great
and you
advice.
can get parked and comfortable before you go inside.
Yep.
So you definitely want to make sure to keep that in mind. But then I will also say, especially maybe for a smaller school, like especially like a Penn State Brandywine, if you are arriving early and maybe you arrive so early, you're so excited and you wanted to leave extra time, and maybe you overestimated how long it would take you to get there, you don't actually have to arrive and get in and checked in necessarily, maybe 5-10 minutes or so beforehand. And I only say that because we sometimes have families that check in, walk in, say, I'm here, and we say, great, your tour guide's in class right now and actually isn't going to be here for another 45 minutes. And they say, okay. And then they just stand there looking at us. What would you like me to say to you? I'm in a Zoom meeting right now or something, so you don't
Sure.
have to arrive too terribly early. We want you to make sure that you're using your time as wisely as possible. But as you arrive, here it is. Jim, you stole my thunder. The student, we would love for the student to introduce themselves as they enter. We want to make sure we hear from the student. We want the student to use their big loud voice. They can do it. I will also say, and again, this is totally anecdotally, but we love to hear how a student says their own name. Because sometimes we make assumptions, or we think that because it's spelled a certain way, it's pronounced a certain way. But we love hearing the student be able to say themselves, my name is Carrie Burton. Do I say it Carrie, Carrie? Won't know until we hear from you. So we love to hear that from the student. That's definitely something that we value when a student walks in and proudly says, I'm here, I'm for my tour. We love that.
Perfect.
And another thing before your tour starts, I know this sounds so silly, but I wanted to make sure to include it because, again, we see all the time, maybe take a bathroom break before your tour. Most tours, and I'm even speaking from Penn State Brandywine's perspective, which has 6 buildings on campus, tour is an hour long. We want to try to not stop on tour if we can help it. University Park has about 240 buildings. I believe that obviously you don't go into all of them, but I believe the tour at University Park right now clocks in at about an hour and a half long. So want to make sure that we are taking care of business if we can before that tour starts, so we don't have to stop on tour if we can help it. Another really kind of nuanced thing, drinks and food, having them on tour. Is that okay? Usually should be okay. Definitely want you to hydrate. Want to make sure you have your water bottle. Absolutely very important. Your Starbucks drink, probably also okay. The salad or, bowl that you got from Chipotle, maybe not necessarily something you want to bring along with you. It might be okay, but keeping in mind and respecting some of the spaces you might be going into on a tour or on a visit, certain residence hall spaces, or maybe certain learning spaces on campus, certain classrooms and instructional spaces might not allow food or drink. And we don't want you to feel like you need to leave it outside or toss it. So just keeping that in mind. You usually should be able to have your little hot chocolate with you while you're touring in February, though, in State College. Trust me, it gets chilly there. Don't be afraid to have your beverage with you.
Perfect.
During your visit, during a tour, you should definitely, and we want you to, kind of be aware of, read and respect your tour guide's cues. And what I mean by that is, got some pictures of one of my favorite tour guides ever, Chevelle, right there. She was probably one of, if not the most engaging tour guide that I've had over, again, the past 11 years, specifically at Penn State Brandywine. And she would, whether you wanted to or not, make you talk with her. Some tour guides are very much regimented in terms of, I say this here, I say it this way, I say it at this time, I need to get this info to you because I'm told to. And no, they're not going to be a robot and they're not going to be reciting from a script word for word. But there may not necessarily be every moment for you to be able to say, well, what they might get to your question before you even have the chance to ask it. So give them the space, give them the opportunity to do their thing. They're trained. In many cases, they're paid. It's a job for them to do that tour. So give them that space to do that. But oops, I went too quickly. Don't be afraid of them. Don't be afraid of the tour guides. I don't want you to be like the person on the left in this picture who's just on their phone and just hiding. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Make sure, again, you kind of read the room and make sure it's a good space for you to be able to do that. But I just want to take a quick second and show you the picture. These students, these tour guides, they literally love their job. These students in this picture here we had a tour guide summit. Tour guides from all the different Penn State campuses got together and they gave, they had a weekend where they collaborated and shared ideas with each other.
Cool.
And they wanted to do that because they love what they do and
That's
they
really
wanted
cool.
to make themselves even better by learning from each other. So don't be afraid of our tour guides. Tour guides love what they do. During the visit, ask for whatever you want and need. You have every right and opportunity to ask for what you want and need while you're on tour, but keep in mind that sometimes the answer is no. So it might be, can we stop and use the restroom right now? Ooh, maybe if you're the only family on the tour, sure, maybe we have the time to take a break. But if there are 50 families on the tour, no, you don't have, you can't take that break right then just for you. Can we go in the bookstore right now? No, you're in the middle of the tour. There are 3 buildings still left. And most importantly, be respectful of your tour guide because there are certain questions that it is uncomfortable for them or they're instructed to not answer. So do not ask them. Don't put them in the position of asking them what their GPA was when they were accepted to the school that they're at. Don't ask them how much they pay, what type of scholarships they've gotten. That's not appropriate. Even though you are innocently asking because you're curious, or maybe they seem really comfortable and conversational and forthcoming, or maybe they're even from your hometown and you knew them growing up. What a coincidence. It's still not really appropriate to ask them that, but mostly because things like that are different for every student every year. So just because Chevelle was accepted with a 3.7 GPA and gets a scholarship of $2,000 each year, doesn't mean every year we accept students with 3.7 GPAs or offer $2,000 scholarships. I made that up. That's not true at all. Chevelle hasn't been a tour guide for 6 years. I don't have any idea what was true for her. But just making sure that you're kind of keeping in mind, they might not be able to answer a question for you because they're not allowed, they're not supposed to, it's uncomfortable, or it's not something that they know. Not all of our tour guides know everything. And a lot of the times that's what admissions counselors are for. The enrollment folks, that's our job to know all the details about our institution. Get the contact info of the people you want to be in touch with while you're at the visit. So if you want someone from athletics, if you want information from the folks specifically in the Office of Student Aid, make sure that you get their info while you're there. Get their business cards. I know I'm coming up on my end of time. I have 2 slides left, don't worry.
It's okay.
After your visit, when a tour is over, and again, I know I really focused big on tours here because most of the time there's going to be a tour component of a visit to a college, and especially if you're 9th, 10th grades before those like 11th specialized visits really start up in like 11th and 12th grade. But anytime that you take some type of an event or have an event at a school, there's usually some type of like follow-up survey or like feedback that will be sent to you after. Please use those. We actually look at the information that you share with us after, even if it's just rankings, even if you don't fill in like the comment box at the end. But if you had a really great or not so great experience, we need to know why, so we can either make it better or know that what we're doing is great and we should keep doing it.
Yeah, Carrie,
And
I'm happy you
I,
brought. Yeah, Carrie, I'm really
yeah,
happy. Sorry to interrupt, but I'm really happy you brought that up because, and again, I know this is one of those that looks different from school to school, but the reality of it is that I've had a number of individual college admissions reps tell me that, I'd be surprised the level of tracking interest from students. And going back to your point about filling this information out and filling information out, even providing information when you're registering for the tours, how important it is for the students' information to actually be that information. Because sometimes that's actually a little bit of information that goes into the student's application, and it is tracked. That interest is tracked at times for colleges and universities. So thanks for bringing that part up about following up and filling out the information that's asked of you. Thank you.
yeah, I will say demonstrated interest, unfortunately, is not a thing that is tracked by Penn State with our
Sure.
120,000 applicants that we have each year.
Sure.
But yes, especially when it comes to like feedback and things like that after,
Yep.
again, we definitely want to make sure that we hear from those students and their families. So fill out those forms, be in touch with us, but also ask us directly if there's certain info or questions that you need. So yes, filling out a form is great and saying, yeah, I had a great time and I got, some info, but I really would have loved to have heard from athletics. Well, that's why we make sure you have, for example, but that's why we make sure you have our contact info
Yep.
after these visits, usually,
Yep.
to reach out and get more info from us. Because even if I can't answer a question for you that you ask after a visit, I will get you in touch with the person who can. And that is maybe someone specialized in the College of Agricultural Sciences, or maybe it's someone specifically, again, from athletics or our Office of Student Aid, Housing and Food Services. A million different people specialize in different things, and I don't specialize in everything. I am a general admissions counselor.
Sure.
I give you the best basic information that I can to
Sure.
get you started on finding out if we're the right fit for you, right? Oh, look at that. We're bringing it full circle here, right? But I give you that
Perfect.
information and give you kind of that intro and that foundation. The tour guides give you that feel, if it's a good feel for you while you're there.
Yep.
But please do not be afraid to be in touch with people like, again, me or Alyssa. I made her info bigger because she is really your counselor, but I didn't want you to think that you couldn't chat with
Sure.
me after.
Yep.
But
Yep.
don't be afraid to be in touch with people like us, because
Awesome.
I know they said it earlier, but this is literally my job. My
Yeah.
job is to help you
Perfect.
through this process. And that's exactly what we're here for. So if I'm going to get paid to do it anyway, make sure that you give me some work to do, right?
No, Carrie, this was awesome. Thank you so much for the information about visits. And yeah, I know, time and time again, I even this time of year and even a little later than this time of year, it's so interesting. We talk about the importance of students going on visits. If you're going on a visit to Penn State's University Park campus, and then you're going to a visit to even, as Jim was on earlier, to Temple in the middle of the city, they are two very different campuses. You're going to have an idea of which one you like more so than the other. And sometimes when we talk about visits, I know, you were kind of hinting to it earlier. Sometimes with visits, it's time, it's resources for the families and setting up these schedules and getting the kids on the campuses. But the reality of it is, at times, I find a number of families over the years telling me it's almost as important to figure out what you do not want as much as what you do want when you go on these visits, and the importance of that. Carrie, you mentioned earlier, and I know, just before we finish up here, we have so many applicants from Unionville to Penn State. You mentioned earlier just some of the specifics outside of even the college visit. I appreciate you sharing in the chat to families. You are a little unique in that how many applicants you get to Penn State. You're not necessarily looking at those letters of recommendation unless it's for that honors college, right? So it's a unique situation from that standpoint. You mentioned interviews, right? And for the vast majority of applicants, there's not going to be an interview option for a student that applies to Penn State. Thank you for sharing both of those. But if you don't mind, just quickly as we wrap things up here, just because we do have a number of applicants that go to Penn State Brandywine and some of the branch campuses, can you give just a little bit of background on what branch campuses look like, what that program can look like if you're staying 2 years at a branch campus and then moving on to Maine, right? Or if you're doing all four, right? If you don't mind, just kind of give it a little bit of a discussion to our community about that, please.
Yeah, absolutely. So really just kind of the way that I think about it and the way that I look at it is you're already doing your college search through all these hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of institutions, even if you're looking in Pennsylvania, the eastern half of the country, the world, so many institutions. And then we just make it even more fun and complicated by saying Penn State has 20 campuses, 20 locations. So you then have to do your own micro searching and understanding of how it works even then within Penn State. But the very quick elevator pitch, 20 campuses within Penn State. The original campus, which a lot of people call main campus, but its actual name is University Park, 46,000 students on campus. So that is in turn the most popular. It has the football team and it has, some of those like bigger feel kind of aspects, but our other 19 locations, we've expanded out since 1855 from just University Park to the other 19 campuses included as well. The academics are the exact same at every single campus. You have the opportunity to start almost every major at every single campus. And then what you were just mentioning, Bob, in terms of starting at one campus and maybe finishing at a different location, not every campus specializes in the final 2 years of every 4-year degree. So just as an example, just throwing it out there again, because Brandywine's the closest, and it's my expertise, haven't been there for 11 years, but there are 14 of the 275 degrees that Penn State offers that are available for all 4 years at Brandywine. But of those 275, almost all of them can be completed as 2+2 programs. We call them 2+2, 2 years at the first campus, 2 years finishing up at the final campus. In many cases, 2+2 is from one smaller campus to University Park, but it isn't always. Some students will do a 2+2 experience from maybe Brandywine, just again as an example, to the Berks campus, because it's a little bit bigger, it's a little bit further away in like the Reading area. All of our campuses, different sizes, they range from, the smaller ones range from about like 500 to about 5,000 students. And then there are different opportunities that are available at certain campuses, certain clubs, certain sports, certain honors programs, study abroad, internships, co-ops. They're all available at all the campuses, but there are more available at bigger campuses. That's just inherently going to be kind of how that works.
Yep.
But there's not lesser quality at a smaller location. It's just kind of what feels right for you, even within Penn State. Again, all the different schools we already talked about, large, small, liberal arts, you will kind of have all the different opportunities to feel different experiences, even within Penn State's different locations. So there's even a little bit of research just within Penn State's 20 campuses to figure out which one might be the best fit for you. Visit multiple. That's one thing that we always encourage families to do. Visit University Park, because you hear it's the cool thing to do, but if you don't like 46,000 people on campus with you, if you're not the most extroverted, crazy Delco girl like me, maybe it's not the right fit for you. Maybe it is, you don't know until you step foot on campus.
Sure.
Also, then maybe check out a Brandywine. It's the closest one to home. Check out a Harrisburg. It's one of the biggest locations. Check out as many of our campuses until you feel like you find the right one. And in most cases, you're going to find one that's a good fit for you. With 20 options, it's kind of hard not to.
Carrie just knocked it out of the park. I appreciate your help tonight. Thank you so much. And thanks for fielding that question at the end. I know it wasn't exactly related to the topic, but we just get so many questions about that 2 and 2 and what that looks like for some of the branch campuses. I appreciate you filling that too. Carrie, Jim, Fletcher, I can't stress enough. I know as Carrie was able to show us tonight, taking time away from your families and spending time with us in the community. I can't begin to tell you year in, year out, how much feedback we get about how these webinars are so positive. They are recorded, so despite what you may be seeing with the participants at the bottom, we get a ton of views on these, and it is extremely helpful for our community, and I get positive feedback year in and year out. So I really appreciate all three of you. Those of you in the community, if you don't mind, down in the chat, there's actually a feedback form for a link we've been sending throughout the presentation. Please fill that out. It gives us nice feedback on these presentations and the topics. Also know in the email that I sent out today to the community, and I'll continue to send out updates on these webinars. And if you go on the Counseling Center website, there's information there also, that the flyer that I sent out also has the topics that we'll be bringing up for each month here. We'll have another webinar in February and another webinar in March with 3 different topics from what we covered tonight on each of those also. So again, thank you to everybody in the community. Thank you to our presenters tonight. A wonderful job. And again, across the board, I really appreciate everybody's participation. Again, I'm Bob Fendora from Unionville Counseling Center. I really appreciate everybody, and thanks a lot again. And thanks for all the help. Thank you, everybody.